The R.E.S.T Bible Study Method. R.E.S.T stands for Respond, Explain, Shape, and Takeaway. This method was designed with 5 things in mind. Number 1, it was designed to help you build the skill of interacting with the Bible. Christians believe that when we read the Bible, we are actually interacting with God. Therefore, the Bible isn't just a book that we read or we study, but we interact with it. Now, all that means is that you can give to God your concerns or your thoughts concerning what you just read, but you can also receive from God His thoughts and the ideas that He wants to give you. You interact with the Bible by giving to and receiving from God. Because interacting with the Bible is a skill, you can get better at it through constant repetition. Number 2, because this method is interaction-based, its primary objective is not application. Now, I love application-based systems like the SOAP method, and I still use the SOAP method even to this day. But this isn't quite that. Whereas application methods are focused primarily on you taking what you have just read and what you've just received and then running with it, this method, its primary focus is the interaction between you and God and whoever you may be doing this method with. It won't be considered a failure if you aren't quite sure what to do with what you just read. In this method, you can apply what you just read, but that's not the primary focus. Number 3, because this method is not primarily application-based, you can really use this when trying to understand the Old Testament. Now again, application methods are great, but they usually focus on the New Testament letters, the Gospels, the Psalms, or the Proverbs. Since this method is more interaction-based, the goal is to understand what you just read and then allow it to shape your views about both God and humanity without the burden and/or responsibility of trying to apply what you just read to your life. Number 4, this method was designed with both current and potential disciples in mind. Virtually every Bible study method that I have interacted with has the presupposition that the person who wants to engage with the material is already a Christian. Therefore, they ask you to do things that you may not be ready to commit to, like praying or desiring more of God. If you are trying to investigate Christianity, or you're working with someone who isn't a Christian yet, then the R.E.S.T method can be a great way of interacting with the Bible without having to commit to practices that a potential disciple may not be ready to engage in yet. You can obviously engage in these practices if you want to, but it's not built into the system. And number 5, this method was designed to help you understand and know God in a relational way. In any good relationship, there is both giving and receiving. Whether you are a current or a potential disciple, the better you get at interacting with the Bible, the better your relationship with God can be. The better you get at giving to and receiving from God, the better and stronger your relationship will be. If any of these things are of value to you, then this method can be a great tool in your Bible study tool belt. Now let's talk about each letter with a little bit more detail, and then we'll go to a chapter and apply what we have talked about. The R stands for response. Here we want to write down our initial thought, our initial response. Here we aren't looking for theological accuracy yet, nor are we initially looking for correct interpretations. Here we just want to simply write down our initial thoughts, our initial response to what we just read. We want to give to God and to whoever we may be reading with our initial thoughts or response to what we just read. The E stands for explain. In this section, we want to write down to the best of our ability what we believe the author was trying to communicate to his audience. Here, we aren't looking for a perfect interpretation just yet. We just simply want to write down what we believe the author was trying to communicate to his audience. The next section is S, and the S stands for shape. In the S section, we record how what we read shapes how we view God and how we view humanity. The Bible is one of God's primary tools for shaping and transforming humanity. That's what the Bible was designed to do. Shape disciples into people who reflect the nature and character of God well. The Bible shapes both our view of humanity and our view of God. So in this section, we ask the questions, how does what I just read shape my view of God? And you ask, how does what I just read shape my view of humanity? Now, for potential disciples, you are allowing the Bible to shape and influence you to see if you will follow what the Bible is talking about. So what you want to do is you have to decide if the beliefs being shaped are more or less true after reading the Bible. You can ask questions like, is what I'm reading in alignment with reality in terms of human nature? Or you can ask even more simple questions like, is what I just read coherent? Did this make any sense? As you read this will allow you to test the truth claims of the Bible. And finally, the T is for takeaway. Here's where you summarize your thoughts after interacting with the Bible. And your takeaway can be many things. It can be a summary of your thoughts, a summary of your emotions. It could be a prayer or a praise. It could be a question that you might need to go investigate or more homework that you need to dig into. But here, the point is simply to summarize and reflect on what you gave to God and what you received from Him and how is it influencing or shaping your life. Now that you understand the method a bit more, why don't we go and read a passage of scripture and apply what we just talked about. I'm going to be reading from 1 Kings chapter 3. Feel free to pause and read the video so we can be on the same page, or just hop into the R.E.S.T method with me. If you want to follow along by writing, be sure to grab a pen and paper or go to growingtruedisciples.com and download the free printable that is associated with this method. All that being said, let's hop into 1 Kings chapter 3. All right, we just got through reading 1 Kings chapter 3. And as we're going through the R.E.S.T method, R-E.S.T, the first thing we start off with is the R. And so as I write down the R and as I look at what I just read, my initial response is, man, Solomon isn't as clear-cut a character as I first remember. He started off with some questionable decisions with marrying Pharaoh's daughter. Why are you making an alliance with Pharaoh and Egypt? And then he's sacrificing in the high places, which when I read it, it didn't feel like it was a good thing that he was doing that. But then the Lord still comes to Solomon and he still blesses him with wisdom. And Solomon was wise enough to ask for wisdom. So my initial thoughts and my initial response is that, man, God works with people who are not all the way put together. And that's just seems like how things are. So that's my initial response. And so I'm just going to write that down. All right. And next we have the E. So E stands for explain. And so as I look at this, if I were to explain it, this genre that I'm reading is narrative. And so the author is trying to continue the storyline of David and how God would use the line of David to produce the Messiah. But we see that the author puts details into the story that show us that the person who is installed as the line of David, the person coming after him, the first person, it's not, right now it didn't look like to be Solomon with some of the decision making, but we don't know. And so if I were to explain it, this is just a continuation of the narrative of the soon coming king. And in addition to that, if I would just explain the narrative, Solomon asked for wisdom, and out of all the things, the Lord blessed him with the things, the ancillary things. And so God blessed him with, when he asked for the right thing, God was able to bless him even with things that he didn't know he needed. And so he asked for wisdom and God gives him wisdom. And so that's pretty cool. And I also want to point out that God answered this prayer in spectacular fashion, because the way Solomon ruled when it came to the two prostitutes was pretty amazing. And it's also really amazing that they used to prostitutes. Like the least of the least were able to come into the king's court and get wisdom, which that probably speaks something as well. It's also good when you are trying to explain to make sure you include the genre that you're in. That'll help you understand more what you are trying to explain. All right, and next we have S. So S stands for shape. So how does what I just read shape my view of God, and how does what I just read shape my view of humanity? Well, here I see that God values justice as something supreme. Because Solomon picked justice, God gave him everything else. But if he had picked revenge or a long life, then he might have not have gotten those other things. So here I'm able to see this shapes my view of God by showing me that he really cares about justice and that he works with people who have questionable decision-making skills. This shapes my view of humanity by showing us that we can make great decisions on one hand, and on the other hand, we can be flawed. We can make alliances with the wrong kind of people, and we can judge wisely. So to me, this shapes my view of humanity by showing me that people were mixed bag. And last but not least, we have T, which stands for takeaway. So my takeaway after reading this is to ask God for wisdom and the ability to judge wisely. We see how supreme God sees this. And even though I may not be a king, I have opportunities to judge wisely in my day-to-day life. So that's my takeaway, to make sure I ask God to help me judge wisely wherever I am and with whatever I'm doing. And I'm doing my takeaway in the form of a prayer. So that's me going through the R.E.S.T method pretty quickly. Obviously, there's a ton you could have got out of this passage, but we just wanted to tackle some of the highlights and just give you a brief overview of it. So this is the R.E.S.T method in a nutshell. Feel free to use it in your own personal devotional time or when you are mentoring or discipling someone else. If you want more information about the R.E.S.T method, be sure to check out our longer video in which I go into the R.E.S.T method in more detail. Go to growingtruedisciples.com and download the printable that talks about and explains the R.E.S.T method in more detail, or check out this playlist that talks about understanding the Bible and building the skill of interacting with the Bible. I know that was a mouthful, but we've got a lot to help you get better at understanding the Bible and understanding this particular method. If you go to growingtruedisciples.com, be sure to check out some of the other skills that we have available as well and continue to grow in godliness. My name is Nathan Wiggins. Thank you so much for watching this video. I pray that it is a useful tool in your Understanding the Bible tool belt. God bless you, and remember that submitting to Jesus isn't just a one-time big decision, but a lifetime of intentional choices. Have a great day.